In the course of this video, we'll be discussing the 24-25 Saugerty Central School District budget that was adopted by the Board of Education during a special meeting on April 23rd. Joining me is Superintendent Dr. Daniel Ursig. Welcome.
Thank you.
So let's get right to this. You and the board worked on this budget diligently all the way up until the 11th hour. Why was that?
So it was a lengthy process. The budget underwent many revisions during our various meetings that we had through the month of April. The big factor of it this year was waiting for the New York State aid runs. The state aid budget was late this year. That, and knowing that several things were coming off federal grants, we had to come up with reductions. So during the various board meetings, we presented various possible reductions to the Board of Education. Ultimately, the board decided a combination of reductions as well as presenting a tax levy that is above the tax cap requiring a supermajority approval.
This school budget was a big challenge this year because things are changing, correct?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors that led into the challenging nature of this budget. The first being that the federal funds related to COVID are being finishing up this year. So that would bring $1.2 million of expenses that were previously funded through the federal funds back into our general fund. Now, if you think about a couple of years ago when this money became available to us, we reached out to the community and things were added such as a certified reading teacher, as social workers. We had a dedicated social worker to each building rather than separating, having them travel. It's also to support our credit recovery program. Last year alone we had 16 students graduate because of the credit recovery program. So these things that I feel, and I believe our community feels, are essential to making our students be successful in their educational career.
Anything else?
Yes, so the other things that I can think about would be our foundation aid from New York State. We had the exact same amount of foundation aid from New York State as we had previously. Prior to this, there has always been a minimum of a 3% increase. So we have not experienced the same gains that we've had in years past due to that. So although expenses are going up, right, as homeowners, you know, everything you purchase has gotten more expensive. CPI is above 4%. We're limited to the same amount of foundation aid that we had last year.
All right, so what are some of the driving factors for expenditures in this budget?
Very good question. So the first one that comes to mind would be the increased cost in special education services. This is due to increased student need. So we're projecting $1.5 million increase from this year to last year. Another driver would be increased health insurance. This past year, we were afforded a premium holiday, which means that we just needed to provide the premiums for 11 months. That has not been guaranteed yet for coming years, so we have to budget for a 12-month premium. So that's another large increase to our budget for that. Then we have the increases in terms of transportation. We're projecting about a $500,000 increase in transportation. We do need to budget for transportation for every student to go to school and back home at the end of the day. Other increases would be increases to the teacher's retirement system, the employee's retirement system, and then just in general, as I've said prior, you know, expenses in your household are going up, so are expenses for the school district.
So what funds are you using that will help offset the tax impact? Sure.
So this year, the board has elected to use $3 million from reserves as well as the fund balance to offset the tax levy to our taxpayers. We've got approximately $800,000 coming out of our ERS reserve, our employees retirement reserve, another $750,000 so from our TRS reserve, our teachers retirement reserve, and then the remaining will be out of our fund balance. These are savings accounts that have been able to be built up over the past couple of years.
And it still is in good shape, even though we may be taking funds from there.
Yeah, so our ERS reserve is very healthy, over $3 million, so that's fine, as well as our other reserves. We do just want to have caution though, right? We are taking from a savings account, so we need to be mindful of our spending and realize that this could impact future budgets as well.
To fill the gap, budget reductions needed to take place. So what did you and the board decide on reducing?
Sure, so this was a very difficult conversation, one I did not want to have in my first year as a superintendency. I also live in the community, right? So these are people that I live with, work with, you know, around us. We did look for things that would have the least amount of impact to students possible. So when examining everything across the board, we've landed on a couple items that will be reduced this year. One such item would be a part-time guidance counselor, part-time Spanish teacher at the secondary level, a math certified teacher, an ELA certified teacher, a science certified teacher. Other reductions include a part-time French teacher at the secondary level, as well as a library media specialist at the elementary level. We also landed on the reduction of 2 typists, reducing stipends for lead teachers. This is lead teachers for math, ELA, social studies, and science, and technology. We are maintaining special education lead teachers because they are integral in the classification process for students. We do have the ability to reduce from a full-time nurse down to a part-time nurse. We currently have 3 instructional coaches. We will be reducing down to 1 instructional coach, so that would be a reduction of 3 instructional coaches. Currently at the elementary level, each building does have a math-focused teacher providing MTSS support for students who need extra math, as well as MTSS for ELA. This current school year, we do have a traveling pair that goes between Cahill and Riccardi. So this next budget has a reduction of one of those traveling individuals. So we're going to be looking at student need and placing that individual into the building and the content area where our students need it most. Other reductions include reducing the number of after-school buses at the elementary level from Monday to Thursday to Tuesday, Wednesday to have saved a little bit there, as well as a reduction in our part-time teaching assistants. Now, these are teaching assistants that are not mandated by students' IEP or other federal requirements. So there will also be a reduction of 10 part-time individuals for that.
And again, these were not easy decisions. The board, as well as yourself, met continually for several weeks to discuss how we could have the least impact, correct?
Correct. So these were lengthy discussions in public session. We added several special meetings to April to have these conversations to get feedback from the community as well. The other thing to consider is a few months prior we did have our strategic planning sessions where we received feedback from several hundred community members as to where they want the Saugerties district to go. So that feedback was also taken into account as well.
There are things that we were able to preserve with this budget, and what were those things?
Very good question. So we are still committed to having a Sawyer experience that our community can be proud of. Among the positions and initiatives that are being preserved would be a social worker in each building, a psychologist in each building. We are going to maintain having 2 reading teachers, which are split amongst our elementary buildings to provide targeted reading intervention support for our most needed students. We are going to maintain 1 literacy coach. New York State has pushed forward with their Science of Reading initiative, which we have started years prior, but we do need to keep the momentum going for that. There will be non-mandated teaching assistants available to each building, so building principals can look and see where their students' needs are and match students' needs with those extra supports in terms of teaching assistants. Another thing that will be maintained in this budget would be armed security. You can recall about a year ago we were having this conversation. We had a community survey go out, and our security started this year. They have become an integral part of our buildings. I think if you walk in our building, you'd think they've been there forever, and that is maintained in this budget. Something else that comes to mind would be our athletic trainer, pre-kindergarten. We're still able to maintain pre-kindergarten, as well as an assistant principal at Cahill, and then as a traveling MTSS teacher that I had talked about previously. Other things that kind of are coming to my mind right now would be maintaining our current arts and music program as it is, maintaining all of our athletics to the same degree that we've had, trying to keep as many field trips going as possible, as well as our clubs. Research says that if students are engaged and feel connected to a building, they're more likely to succeed, and we're committed to those things.
This budget also presents a capital outlay project.
Yeah, so capital outlay projects we've actually been taking advantage of for the past couple of years. It is a capital project up to $100,000 that the district can improve their facilities on. In prior years, it's been focused on the flooring at Riccardi Elementary School. This year, we'd like to have in the budget, so that we plan for next year and then carry it out the following year, would be having more ADA compliant accesses to Riccardi Elementary School. Currently, it's only the front door and then the side door back by the gym. So we'd like to have another ADA compliant access at the end of the kindergarten hallway so that a student can exit out to the playground, as well as another entrance exit by the cafeteria. The benefits of this project is that if it's under $100,000 or if it's up to $100,000, we get the state aid back the very next year. If it does go over the $100,000, then you get it back over 15 years. So it's nice to have that chunk of money, get the work done, and then get the return on the investment the very next year.
All right, let's get to what people, I feel like, really want to know. What will this budget cost a typical homeowner?
Sure. So the tax levy that was approved or adopted by the Board of Education and will be going out for a vote is an increase of 4.91%. The tax levy is the total amount of taxes that the school district needs from all of its taxpayers to support the budget. The amount a taxpayer is charged per $1,000 of assessed property is called the tax rate and is determined by dividing the tax levy into the total assessed value of the school district. At this point, we have an estimate, and it's strictly an estimate at this point. We picked a house worth $300,000, figuring that would be easy to scale up and scale down. So we're projecting that a house valued at $300,000 by the town of Saugerties would be an increase of $222 compared to last year's tax amount. The Board of Education also approved tax exemption to reduce the level of taxes for volunteer firefighters this fall. And anyone qualifying for that exemption will see that reduction.
So maybe we need some clarification. Can you explain the tax cap and how it impacts the budget?
Sure. So the tax cap is an 8-step formula to determine what amount a school district can increase with a simple majority vote. If we go over that amount, then we have to have a supermajority or 60% of the vote. So the tax cap is not necessarily a cap, it's more of a threshold as to what percent of the voters need to approve it.
All right, something that we don't want to discuss is if the budget isn't approved by the voters, what happens next?
Sure, so if the budget isn't approved by the voters on May 21st, we have got a couple options that we can go with. The board can put the exact same budget up for a vote a second time and see what happens. They could put up another budget with different reductions or added reductions and see if that goes. Or we can jump straight to contingency budget. If the board just chooses to have a second vote and that doesn't get approved, we would be forced to go to contingency at that point in time. If we do go to contingency, that would be a further reduction of roughly $2.6 million. So those would be extremely difficult conversations that we would have to have in order to get to that amount. So at that time, we're looking at non-mandated items. So some examples of non-mandated items that come to my mind would be athletics, reduction in perhaps arts and music offerings that we're offering our students. Kindergarten is one of those non-mandated items, as well as UPK. If you've been listening to the board presentation, I've been saying how UPK, the amount that we get from the state, doesn't cover all the UPK expenses. So we do contribute to them, or we will be contributing to them next year if the budget passes. But that could be something that we've grown accustomed to here in Saugerties that kind of starts the Sawyer experience that we may have to consider eliminating.
And what are some of the things that we need to think about that maybe the community is just concerned with, like maybe the misconceptions? Like, for example, where are the funds from? Since we closed Mount Marion, where are those funds now that we couldn't reap the benefits from?
Good. So good question. So misconceptions. Number one, about repurposing Mount Marion, right? So when we were having those conversations, we talked about how about removing that as an elementary school would save funds in terms of staffing positions. We also said at that time, though, that we wanted to reinvest in our students. So it is not where we have a money set to the side of savings. It is we took that money and we invested in our students. So for example, we added a reading teacher. Saugerties is in the education business and we did not have dedicated reading specialists for our most at-risk students for that. We were able to add that because of that. We also added other things throughout the district to enhance. So that's kind of one of those misconceptions. But I would kind of maybe turn that around and say, okay, if Mount Marion was still operating as an elementary school, what would the cost truly be? And then what opportunities would our students have not been exposed to, and how much more of a reduction would we need to in order to maintain the quality of education that we want in Saugerties.
Any other misconceptions?
Yeah, so I've been going around talking with various people, and so other things that have come up are a misconception about how certain items are paid for. And what I mean by that is, as a district, our funding comes through various sources. One is the state aid, which is reflected in the revenue part of the budget, our tax levy, which is what the voters are approving. But we also get grants and title funds through the federal government and various things. Those items are earmarked for certain things. So we have a bucket of money that is specifically for example, professional development. So that money has to be spent on professional development items. So it's not that So if we're using that money, right? It's not that we're taking money away from our students. It's we're using this money and we're using to enhance our student experience. Other items would be we recently actually several years ago we received a STEM lab grant, and those lab kits are finally arriving. This was a couple years in the making, so those were rolling out to our buildings, but it was actually approved through a grant years ago.
All right, well, thank you very much. That was very helpful and informative. Make sure to get out and vote on May 21st, 6 to 9 at all of our elementary schools.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.